I believe we are live, everybody. As soon as this pops up, I'm going to close it. And okay, so welcome everybody. I'm going to do this really quick so we can get into it because we're running late. But I want to thank our sponsors. First sponsor, CloudBees. If you don't know them, they do a ton in the DevOps, CI/CD, value stream space. If you're looking for enterprise grade solutions and tried and tested, check them out. Also, BMC, big players, new sponsors to DevOps Toronto, but not least. And they handle a ton of stuff as well, a little bit outside of where CloudBees specializes, but that's why they're sponsors as well, because we don't have competing sponsors. Everybody's friends here. And last but not least, actually first is JFrog, because JFrog's been with us for the longest, and they are wonderful sponsors to our community and DevOps community as a whole. They're always hosting events, being part of events, sharing their thoughts. And so, oh, I have a Zoom pop-up covering my slides. Is that true?
Nope.
All right.
I see the big JFrog thing.
Okay, I had a heads up from Vlad. I appreciate that, Vlad. I'll check it out. Let me know if anyone else is noticing anything weird. But that's pretty much the end of my slides. I just want to introduce Benjamin, and Benjamin's going to talk about Scrum in the real world, which is really the only context that I care about it in. And Azure DevOps, I think, is an interesting angle that I haven't heard of before. I like folks talking about Scrum in real world context, and also in the context of tooling, because obviously everybody is obsessed with tooling. So anytime we could put something valuable in the context of tooling where people are paying attention, that's awesome. So I'm very interested to hear this. I really don't know what to expect from this talk. So I will hand it off to Benjamin. He can get right to it. I'm going to stop my share and let you take over.
Cool.
And the house is all yours.
All right. Do you see my slides?
Yes.
All right. And now I clicked on it and it went away. Oh, man. Please hold. Your call is very important to us.
There you go.
Let's try that again. All right. So this is Real World Scrum with Azure DevOps. I'm Benjamin Day, owner of Benjamin Day Consulting, based out of Brookline, Massachusetts, which is basically, it's Boston. It's the next town over from Boston. I can walk to Boston in probably under 5 minutes. Consultant and trainer. I like to think of myself as a rental chief technology officer who can still actually write code and do all kinds of techie stuff. I also think of myself as a therapist for teams, which I, at some point, had the great idea, I'll just rebrand myself as therapist for teams. And I went and bought the domain therapistforteams.com, locked that up for like 5 years because like this is going to be my permanent brand. And then I went to go hook it up to my web server and my email. And that was the first time I'd ever seen it all in lowercase and noticed that that actually is the rapist for teams. So that didn't work out. So if anyone has any good branding ideas, let me know. So I do Scrum, Azure DevOps, Azure Team Foundation for software architecture, all kinds of stuff. I'm a Microsoft MVP. I've won that award a lot of times, like 15 times or something for this product. I'm also a Pluralsight author. So if you've heard of Pluralsight, the Netflix of technical training. So sign up with them and you can watch all kinds of courses. As far as Scrum stuff goes, I'm certified up the wazoo at scrum.org. I'm as one of the very first Scrum.org trainers. So I am certified to teach a whole bunch of courses through them. And yeah, follow me on Twitter, heckle me on Twitter, whatever you want to do on Twitter. I'm at Ben Day. And then one last little shameless plug about those Pluralsight courses. I've got a whole bunch of them, and I've got 2 that are really recent in the last 6 months on Azure DevOps. So go watch those. And yeah, watch them, because that's how Daddy gets paid. Oh, and speaking of getting paid, the last time that I was in Toronto, I got a $17,000 phone bill. That is 17,000 spot 00. Just about the price of a car was my phone bill, because I was on the international unlimited plan for my cell phone, and I thought that when I was international, it would be unlimited, but I hadn't read the fine print where unlimited only meant unlimited up to the first 100 megabytes. And I streamed about a gig while I was there. And yeah, $17,000, had to pay for it. That was awesome. All right. So since we don't have a ton of time, I'm going to hop in and just start doing demos. So just to get a feel from the room, how many of you do Scrum right now, or work with Scrum or Agile or whatever at work? You know what? I'm not even sure how to find out. Yeah, had to pay. I did not have mobile insurance. AT&T made me pay for it. It was pre-Twitter. I think if Twitter had existed at the time that I got that bill, it probably would have gone viral. I wouldn't have had to pay, but yeah, that was awesome.
That is wild.
Yeah.
I would love to pop up a poll for you right now for Scrum, but that is excruciatingly difficult in Zoom, unfortunately. But
I'm going to say no. I'm going to assume that people kind of know what Scrum is about.
yeah,
The short form is it's done working software in 30 days or less. So what you're trying to do is you recognize that at all times you have more things than you can possibly achieve in any reasonable amount of time, and you're trying to break that problem of too much stuff to do down into usable chunks that you can actually deliver on. Those chunks are called sprints. Sprints are 30 days or less. And at the end of every sprint, you're going to deliver done working software. Now, just to talk a little bit about how I think about Scrum as a Scrum trainer, you'd think that my goal in life is to make people great at Scrum. And my goal in life is absolutely not that. I personally don't care if you're good at Scrum. What I care about is, are you and your team good at delivering done working software that creates customer delight, and that it's valuable to your customers and valuable to your employer and whatever? And that is the primary thing that I care about. After that, I think that using Scrum is actually a way to get to delivering great done working software. I like how we've got, wow, not many people are using Scrum right now. We've got a lot of sortas. Huh, cool. All right, so I'm going to jump in. So Azure DevOps, there's a cloud version and an on-prem version. This is the cloud version. And if you log into this, you can do all kinds of great stuff. There are paid versions and unpaid versions. You can do an awful lot if you're a team of 5 people or less. If you're 5 people or less, you've got free access to the tool. Let me move this poll window out of the way. So first off, I'm going to create a new project, and let's call it Toronto Scrum Demo. You can make it public or private. I'm going to make it private one. When you create it, you have the option to choose what version control repository you're going to default to. The two that you get out of the box are Git and Team Foundation version control. So Git is Git, like we've all probably heard of. Team Foundation version control is a centralized version control repository. And honestly, most people are using Git these days, so let's use Git. And then under here, these first four are the out-of-the-box process templates. They just define what you get when you start. So what is the structure of your project when you get going? I'm going to choose Scrum. You can also customize the heck out of it. So I've got two different ones that I've customized for other demos, but let's choose Scrum and click Create. All right. So here is the landing page for this. There's a ton of features inside of Azure DevOps. We've got the ability to do dashboards. There's wikis that are in there. Projects, all the version control stuff is in there. So since I chose Git, we're getting access to version control, things like all the commits, pushes, branch merge, tags, pull requests. Pipelines is the automated build stuff. So automated build, automated release. So all your DevOps stuff. Test plans is QA testing. Artifacts. Probably the easiest way of saying that would be artifacts allows you to have private NPM, private NuGet package repositories. It's a way of sharing stuff internally that you would otherwise have to publish to the public internet. But let's go up to boards. Boards, this is the project management stuff. And it dumps you into this form, into this view right here, which is just the recently updated. And since I just created it, there is no recently updated. So I'm going to click over into backlogs. So a product backlog is your list of everything that you might ever do in the product. And a product backlog item, sometimes a lot of teams call them user stories. Other teams call them requirements. Product backlog item, requirement, user story, all the same thing. So I'm going to make some sample ones: PBI-A, PBI-B, PBI-C, PBI-D. And one of the things that you'd be doing when you are working with Scrum is that you're going to be trying to deliver based on priority. So let's say that PBI-A is the top priority thing that your team is going to deliver. Drag it up to the top. Let's say D is the least high priority. Drag that around. So right there, you can start doing prioritization of what's happening on your boards. So let's hop in here, and we've got a whole bunch of different fields that we can do. So let's say add a description for this requirement. The app should do some cool stuff. Acceptance criteria. Let's do some things in here. It should make the customer smile. Let's add an emoji. Yay. If you log in as an admin, it should work. If you log in as a basic user, you should see nothing. Let's fix my typo. Click save. And now that's saved. One of the things we've got here is the effort field. So I know this is probably about as popular as poking yourself in the eye, but a lot of teams do something called story pointing. So story point estimations are just a technique for getting to a pretty good estimate on what you're trying to do. And usually what a team would do for their effort, their story point estimation, is they choose values from the Fibonacci sequence. So I'm going to make this a 13. So let's say that a 13 is a fairly large amount of work. Click save. And let's close and go back here. And now you can see that we've got an effort in that column. So we can start to see what what's going on. I'm going to come in here and I'm going to drop a couple other effort things in. Make that an 8. Let's make this a 21. I'm just picking values from Fibonacci sequence. Ideally, what would happen is you'd be doing something like planning poker to have your entire team come together to estimate how big they think these things are. Let's do another one. Let's make this one also a 21. All right. So right now we've got these things all set to be in sprint number 1. And I don't think that that's necessarily what we would want to do. By default, as you create new work items, it puts them into what's known as the current sprint. Current sprint is the sprint that's running right now according to dates. And what I like to do is I like to make sure that everything that I'm creating is on the backlog. So on the team's backlog rather than assigned to any particular sprint. If it's assigned to a sprint, that means that the team is actually going to work on this thing. If it's on the backlog, that means they're just thinking about it. And it might happen, it might never happen. All right. So let's say, let's turn on forecasting. So as I turned on forecasting, this starts to give me a way to plan when is certain amounts of work going to show up. And it's a little confusing right now because none of the values line up. So we've got these story point values of 13, 18, 21, and 21. And velocity is the estimate for what your team can actually deliver to done, the amount of story points the team can deliver to done inside of a single sprint. So let's say that it's 13. If we change it to 13, then it starts drawing lines saying that, okay, this is probably going to happen in one sprint. This will happen another sprint. Let's change this to be a little bit bigger. Let's make it 21. Now it draws a line in a slightly different place. So what this does is this helps us to figure out, roughly what do we think we can actually do in any given particular sprint. Now, what is a little confusing, something that I've always hated about this UI, is that the label for sprint 2 or for sprint 3 is always overlapping with sprint 1. So these first two are actually eligible to go into sprint 1, but the label says sprint 2. So just remember that that's confusing. But let's say that we want to assign this for work to happen inside of sprint 1. So I'll drag these things, put them into sprint 1, and now we can see that sprint 1 actually has some work in there. So let me go in and let's look at sprint 1. So one of the things that you would do as in sprint planning is you're going to decide what do you think you can actually do inside of a sprint. What can we drive to done inside that sprint? And then also, what is our plan for how we're going to actually do this stuff? So one of the things that's really helpful when you're doing planning is to turn on something called a task board view. So this shows you for each product backlog item, what is the status of that thing. Right now we have no tasks, but let's come in and let's create some. So let's call this task A1, task A2, task A3, task A4. And let's do some other ones for this one. Task C1, task C2, task C4. All right, so we can see inside of our sprint that there's a whole bunch of stuff that's in to do. Nothing has made it to done yet, but we're still in the process of planning what we're going to do inside of our sprint. Let's go back to our sprint backlog, and if we open these things up, we can see what are all the tasks related to that particular requirement. So remember that a product backlog item is a requirement that we think we're going to deliver. If we look over here, we can start to see that we've got 2 product backlog items in the sprint, 8 tasks. And let's go in here and let's start adding some time estimates. And let's just make each one of these things 40 hours of work. Let's make that also 40. Make this 40. Now, once again, you'd be doing this estimation with your team, ideally. And one of the things you can do inside of a sprint is you can start doing capacity planning. Now, right now, I haven't, if we look over here, we see it says no iteration dates. So let's set some dates so we can start lighting up the screen with better information. So let's make the sprint start on today, and let's make it be 2 weeks long. So it ends on the 17th. All right. So now we see we have 11 workdays remaining. Let's come over to the capacity tab and let's add some people to our team. So let's add my friend Brian. Let's see, who else do we have? What users do I have? You know what? Here, let's just do this. There's another nice little thing in here that's buried under this ... menu. Add all team members. There are no other team members. That's why it's not doing anything. All right, so let's assume that we have just 2 people on our team. And let's put our capacity for per day, like at Brian can work 4 hours. I can work 6 hours. And let's save that. And let's do team days off. Let's say that we're taking Friday off. So 1 day off there. And let's say that, well, I'm going on vacation. So I'll put my vacation date in there. 4 days off. And we'll click save. So let's come back over to the backlog. Open that up. And let's come over here to work details. So if we see work details, this stuff is already lighting up as on fire. So we haven't even gotten into creating estimates for the tasks for PBIC. So that second thing, and we already can see that we have a capacity of 82 hours inside of our project, and we have 160 hours worth of work. So what do you do when you run into that problem? Well, obviously, you don't descope, you just change the estimates. So let's just change the estimates. Hint, you don't really just change the estimates. But as I'm changing these things, you'll see that the number of remaining hours and the health of our sprint is getting a lot better. So now that we're under that 82 hours thing, we can see what's actually going on there, and we're in reasonably good shape. So this work details thing is really handy as you're doing sprint planning. If you know what your capacity is for your team, you can start seeing as you add the work that how are we doing? Are we overloaded with work? Do we have enough work? Do we have too much? Excuse me, do we have too much work? And in this case, well, we can see that we're probably only going to get one thing done. So let's move this second PBI back to the backlog, make it go away. And now this is, let's say that this is what we're going to do for our sprint. If I wanted to, I also could assign work to individuals. So let's assign some work to Brian, assign some work to me. And we get the same kind of thing again if we start seeing that people are overloaded with work. So let's assign this to Brian, and that should make my thing look better. So if you care about assignments inside of your team, you can do it just by drag and drop. All right. So let's come over here. Let's look at our task board. So one of the things that Scrum is famous for is the Daily Scrum, which is the team's 15-minute meeting per day to look at how they're actually doing towards delivering done working software. And one of the things that can be really helpful inside of that meeting is looking at this task board. So if we look at the task board, we see that nothing's in progress, nothing is done. But let's say we have a conversation and we decide, okay, we're going to start working on this, and we're going to start working on this. So we drag those two things in there. We can see how many hours are remaining on the PBI grand total. We can see how many how many hours are left in to do, how many are in progress. And as we work on this thing, we can update the estimates for the remaining work. So let's say that we work on this for a little bit, change it to 20 hours. And now that in progress number has gone down. Let's say Brian works on this and gets it to done. Let's drag it over to done. And that zeroes out the hours, marks that item is finished. And yeah, you just keep on working until ideally you've made it all the way through in progress to done. And when you're done with that, come over here, mark your product backlog item is done, and you're done with that product backlog item. All right. How am I doing on time, by the way? I kind of lost track of when we started.
You are probably halfway, but yeah, you've just safely got 15 minutes.
Okay, cool. All right. So let's flip this over and let's talk a little bit about what you can do with something called the Kanban board. Well, I call it the Kanban board. I think they just call it the board. So if you're used to working in Kanban, you can totally work that way if you want to, where you're working less targeted on maybe individual tasks, more you're thinking about what is the flow of product backlog items through your system. This is also really handy if you're a project manager for viewing what's actually going on inside of your sprint. So let's change this over. Let's change the iteration to current iteration. So that'd be our current iteration. What work do we have planned? Right now we have nothing else planned, but we have one item that's made it all the way to done. We can look at what are the items that are there. So all these tasks are completed. And you know what? Let's go back over to the backlog. And let's take PBIC and let's say that we actually are going to try to do it in the sprint. So we'll go back over to here. And if we're looking at our board, looking at the requirements level view, you can see, okay, we've got one thing that's in here, and let's say that it's committed, meaning we're going to work on it. We've got 4 items, none of them are done. And then we've got this one has made it to done. And just to make this fun, let's come over here and I'm going to initialize my Git repo. So initialize, and let's add a new file. Really important .txt. This is stuff that we care about. This is the most important thing ever. We're working on this. All right, so we'll commit that. Come in here. Let's go back over to board. So we've got some stuff going in version control. Let's not worry too much about what we're doing there. Come over to boards. And let's say that we're looking at what's happening in our sprint right now. And we're thinking about starting work on PBIC. This view can be really, really handy because one of the things we can do is we can just sort of right click on it and say new branch. So new branch, and let's call it, I don't know, PBIC feature branch. It automatically associates this requirement with this branch. So we'll create branch. And now it goes and creates a branch in version control. So if we go in here and let's start making some changes. some really, really important change. Let's come in here, do another one. If I commit a lot, I'm productive, right? Yes. And let's come in here. Let's do another one. And actually, let's associate this to a task. So one of those tasks that's in our project plan, come in here. Let's commit it. And let's go back over to our board. So we can see that there's a bunch of stuff that's happening. Let's come into this PBI. And we can see that we've got the child PBIs here. We've got a link to a particular branch, so we know what's going on inside of that. I think I just made an association to C4, right? Yeah, so when I checked in and I associated it to that, I can now record work against that task and against that PBI. And if we were doing a demo of what we could do in automated builds, those would start showing up in our release notes, in our build notes. So we can start to associate the builds that are happening with this particular branch. So that's in there as well. Another thing that can be really nice is let's add a test. So if we know we have to do some QA tests, let's do PBI C as an administrator, PBI C as a unauth user, PBI C as a basic user. So this is, I just added 3 different QA test cases, and you can see that it's now showing me that we've got 3 test cases that have no results on them. If I went to go click into this, I could go and add an actual QA steps. So open the app, go to page. So I can start to create some test cases in here. And when I went and did @URL and @username, it now gives me the ability to add some test parameters. So let's go to benday.com, login as Benday, Amazon, login as Jay Bezos. And we've got a couple test cases that are in there. If we want to go run this test case, we can go run it through the QA test case stuff, or I can just say, oh yeah, this is failing. I can just mark it, or I can say this is blocked, or I can say that this is passing. And now, as we come over here and hover over this, oop, that didn't work. It can show us quickly on this view what the state of our stuff is. Let's come over here and let's mark this as done. Save that. We now can see 1 of 4 items is done. And this view just helps us to understand what's actually going on inside of our sprint. And at a requirements level. We can start doing filtering. We can filter on what tags we're doing. We can filter on who it's assigned to. A lot of different things that we can do. All right. I guess I'm going to give one thing I didn't do when I was going through backlogs. Let me turn forecasting off. Sometimes you have really, really big requirements, like epics would be something that we see a lot. So let's come over here. So say mapping. And by default in this project template, epics are called features. You can change that if you want to. Let's create some features. Say big feature 1, 2, 3. and then Thingytown, USA. All right, so we've got a bunch of epics that we've added. Let's go back to our backlog. And let's switch this over to backlog items. And if these things are mapped to particular epics, we can drag them onto our epics. So those two are related to Thingytown, USA. That one's related to big feature. And if I come over here and I turn on parents, I can now see how these things all break out. So I can get a good view of what's happening at that feature level. Now, if I come back over to boards, right now this is, let me get rid of current iteration. Right now we're looking at backlog items. Let's say that you're like an executive and you just want to know what is the state of stuff that's happening in the big grand scheme of things in our project. Well, in this case, you can start to see, okay, well, Thingytown USA has 2 PBIs that are in it. Neither of them are done. We've got this other one over here that has 0 items out of 1. And then this one, no one's done any planning on anything. So you can plan at various levels inside of Azure DevOps. All right. And I think I'm just about out of time on that. I want to hop over and just show you, since this is the DevOps group, I want to show you, let's see. Show you the pipelines that I've got for one of my projects. Right now, my pipeline is failing. So let's click on this. And I've got multi-stage releases that are happening. So build, release to task, wait for approval, and then release to prod. So I can see what's happening through all this stuff. If I were doing Scrum, I would definitely want to be associating the check-ins that I'm doing to the automated builds and to the branches so that this stuff automatically would light up. I'm not doing that. So right here where it says 0 related work items, it's not generating any release notes for me. But if we were doing that, we could totally get that. If we drill into the individual stages inside of our automated build, we can get full-on information about what happened inside of that build. We can get access to why it failed, access to information about how it was deployed. Did anything go wrong as that went? If I want to come back over here, I can look at the artifacts that are part of my automated builds. So all my scripts, my published applications. So even though this is a Scrum talk, being able to do CI/CD as part of your Scrum process really will help your overall Scrum practice. But if you're doing the project management side, that's all in here and really handy for taking a look at. And at that point, I think I want to open this up for questions.
All right, thanks for that. Anybody have questions about this? I've always got questions. I guess my first question is, what's it like to be on a different style of working, a different way of working, and change or experiment with different ways of working inside of something like Azure DevOps? Like if I want to try switching between sprints where I have everything captured in, a 3-week block of time, and I want to switch to, let's see what it would be like to run Kanban and just like straight single piece flow, for instance, for 6 weeks, see what happens. Maybe we do that with like one of my teams and all the rest of them running as usual, and we want to see and be able to like compare between the two.
Yep. It's perfectly happy to do that. Azure DevOps will go as far off-road with you as you care to take it. And as someone who specializes in consulting for that, it can actually be kind of a pain, because sometimes you see customers that get really like messed up as as they go. But yeah, it's perfectly fine. So if you were doing Scrum for a while and you decided that you wanted to hop in and just start doing Kanban, you can absolutely do that. And there are even some great features in here, like you can edit the columns, you can edit the swim lane. So let's say that you have a expedite swim lane where anything that shows up here would be an emergency fix. That bombed. Where did that go? Here we go. And let's say that PBIB is now like a hot fix for production or something. You can drag that in there and you can start viewing that stuff all separately. Yeah, there's tons of flexibility in this. Additional points of flexibility, if you wanted to, let's go to project configuration. What am I doing wrong? Oh, I'm in the wrong place. Let's go back up to here. Let's go to organization settings and let's go to process. So I've got those two customized things. If I wanted to go and customize another one, so let's go here and say create inherited process. Let's say our version of Scrum. Create process. Let's go in here and edit this. You can then go and edit all the items that are in here. So add fields, change what the states are, change what the rules are. There's tons of flexibility for that.
Is there any way to actually loan this? Like, say you have a parent organization and you're just like spinning up a greenfield team and it's got its own sort of organization, but you want to kind of clone over all the nice automations and triggers and process steps and nice bells and whistles from let's say a template of like, this is what, a fully featured, highly automated team workflow looks like, and you can customize from here, but here's the thing. Can you do that?
Can you just say capture a project and then right click and do it as a template?
Well, like, can you capture kind of project or like workflow behavior, not the contents, right? Because the contents are like, it's like I'm imagining a CI/CD, but for workflow, right? Like what's flowing through your CI/CD pipeline is completely unique at any given moment.
Yep.
But all the automation around it, all the structure around it, the scaffolding is clonable, and it's even like committed to version control at this point.
Yeah. Yep. So what's the question there?
So I'm wondering if there's something similar for workflow. We have code-driven pipelines. We have pipelines as code. We don't have workflow as code anywhere that I've seen, but I'm wondering if you've seen anything like that.
I haven't. I mean, the closest way you could really get into that would be you'd probably start by creating like some sort of a fork of your process template, and then you make a bunch of changes to it, and then when you come back over here, let's create a new project, and let's call it Toronto Demo 2. Let's choose our version of Scrum. If you'd customize that with a bunch of default items, it would show up with a bunch of default items. There's also under the surface REST APIs so that you could code all this stuff up too. But I'm not sure how happy you'd end up being with this just out of
Cool. All right. We had a question earlier from Jackie. I'm not sure if it's been answered yet, but I suspect not. Do you have any recommendations for planning poker versus t-shirt sizing or other estimation measurement schemes? And what should we consider when making a choice?
Oh, I think for best results, don't estimate. And that is getting really, that's hard to sell to a lot of organizations. Managers like to have people giving estimates on times, estimates on level of effort. If you can avoid it, I think it's oftentimes it's a lot of waste to estimate stuff. But if you're going to do planning poker, I think that's actually a pretty good way to go. So I'd say choose. I'd probably start with Fibonacci sequence. So 1, 2, 3, 5, 8, 13, 21, etc. as your values. And then if you're starting out new, you'd usually say something like 8 is going to be our medium size, or 5 is going to be our medium size. And then you start estimating work that you've already done. So you start trying to say, okay, well, we did this requirement last year, and how much work did it feel like? Did that feel like a 5 or an 8 or a 13 or a 1? Estimate a bunch of work you've already done. And that starts to build context around those story point values, like the 1, 2, 3, 5, 8, 13s. Like, what do those actually mean? And then once you've got sort of a feel for what those values meant for work that you've already delivered, then start estimating things that you haven't done yet using those values. And you try to guess, like, does this feel like an 8, or does this feel like a 13, or does this feel like a 40 or something like that? I like planning poker numbers, the Fibonacci sequence stuff, because you can add them up. T-shirt sizing, it's tough to do math with t-shirt sizes. So, long-winded answer.
I like that answer. I've run into the same thing, and I just do 1, 3, 5 for t-shirt sizing. I translate your t-shirts into a numerical value, but
yeah,
that can be any scale. It can be 1, 2, 3 or whatever. But I like all that answer. The one thing I hadn't heard before was look back in time and use that as a benchmarking tool. I like that approach.
Yep.
I think we had one more question. Can we get the reports and graphs status for a specific part or activity? For example, testing activities, dev activities.
So actually, I looked away to find this blog post.
Oh yeah, no problem.
So if you're interested, here, let me paste this into the chat.
Cool. And I'll give you the question again.
There you go. I think I cover almost all the stuff that I just said. So if you got questions, email me. I'm happy to do that. All right. So what was the question?
So the question was, can we get reports and graph status for a specific part or activity? And the examples are testing activities, dev activities. So specific types of activities.
If you capture those activities as types of activities, then yes. So let me go back to the demo number 1. Boards. And so let's open up this task. If I say that this is a deployment task and save it, and then this one over here is development task, and then let's make this one a development task. I've got an awful lot of options of what I can do. I'd probably need to go and create a custom query to break that out, but that that would be pretty straightforward to go and create a query and then turn that into into something that shows up on your dashboard. And then there's a ton of stuff that you can do just out of the box as far as dashboards go. Let's see what happens if I throw a couple of these on there. Group by. Shared queries. I don't have any queries. Pretend that demo was amazing. But the answer is yes.
Fair enough. All right, awesome. Well, we're at 5 after 6. I'm going to let you off the hook. I am going to say